traitor.
Looking at me, somebody's watching me, help me.
Get him out of there.
Help me,
Quick.
help me, help me.
Release the subject on the double.
For over half a century, a dark chapter of the legendary series The Twilight Zone, titled The Encounter, was completely erased from television airwaves. This episode was sealed away not just for simple violent scenes, but because it touched upon the most painful wound of post-war American history: racial hatred and prejudice. After 55 years in the shadows of strict censorship, these controversial frames have finally been brought to light. This is more than just a sci-fi story. It is a journey confronting long hidden fears and grim truths, beginning with the rebellious mindset of its creator.
Look, if said minor league horse player tells you a half-witted story, can you tell me in one simple statement whether or not I'm off my rocker?
Rod Serling never accepted creating mindless entertainment just to please the networks. As a veteran who personally experienced heavy psychological trauma on the Pacific Front during World War II, he understood the dark corners of human nature better than anyone. When he began building the Twilight Zone in 1959, Serling's goal was not merely to tell science fiction tales, but to use them as a protective cloak to launch a direct attack on bigotry and the sensitive issues of American society. He skillfully transformed bizarre dimensions into a mirror to shine a light on racial prejudice and the smoldering obsession with division. Serling's rebellion stemmed from painful failures in confronting the censorship apparatus in his earlier work. In a famous interview with the New York Times, he bluntly expressed his outrage regarding freedom of speech. "A writer can tell the truth on Mars and nobody objects, but if he tells the truth in Alabama, every sponsor will withdraw immediately." This declaration became the guiding principle for his career, driving him to find ways to cross the fence by disguising political and social issues as aliens or non-existent supernatural phenomena. During the 1960s, American television stations were extremely concerned about offending major sponsors or sparking public outcry. Scripts containing social critiques were often truncated or modified until they lost their original meaning to ensure safety. Serling understood that for these messages to spread, he had to create a world outside of normal control. He believed that through imagination, audiences would more easily accept the grim truths they would otherwise reject if placed in a realistic, everyday setting. This courageous creative thinking laid the foundation for the birth of the episode The Encounter. This was one of the few instances where Serling bravely brought human-to-human conflict to a climax without the need for strange creatures. He wanted to prove that the greatest fears do not come from outer space, but from a buried past and unresolved prejudices. The episode was expected to be a heavy blow to society's artificial silence regarding past mistakes, forcing viewers to look back at what happened after years of historical upheaval. Throughout the production process, Serling maintained the view that art has a responsibility to reflect the true nature of society. He once shared his mission with colleagues: "Our job is to ask unpleasant questions, even if the answers never satisfy us." This unwavering steadfastness made The Encounter a legacy that is both deeply proud and incredibly painful in Rod Serling's illustrious career. Still, as the cameras began to roll, nobody in the film crew could have guessed that the setting of a cramped attic was about to become the detonator for one of the most brutal psychological tragedies ever to appear on American television. The Trap in the Attic. The episode The Encounter first aired on May 1st, 1964, taking the audience into a minimalist but extremely suffocating space: the attic of Fenton, an American veteran drowning in failure and alcohol. The setting was designed like a closed box where summer heat and the clutter of old memorabilia created psychological pressure weighing down every frame. The story begins when Arthur, a Japanese-American youth played by George Takei, appears to ask for part-time work. This seemingly normal encounter between two strangers suddenly becomes terrifying when they both face a samurai sword, a trophy Fenton brought back from the Pacific Front after an event he was not proud of involving an enemy soldier. Tension began to escalate as the sword seemed to radiate a strange energy, causing the dark corners of both their souls to be exposed. Fenton, who always tried to hide his cowardice and past mistakes with a gruff exterior, began spewing derogatory slurs filled with prejudice. In response, Arthur also gradually shed his gentle appearance to admit a shocking secret. His father was a secret agent who helped guide enemy planes during the attack on Pearl Harbor. Fenton shouted in extreme paranoia, "You didn't come here for a job, you came for this sword, for the hatred that is bred into your blood." This was no longer a conversation between two individuals, but a collision between two masses of wounded memories and hereditary hatred. Martin Goldsmith's script pushed the characters into a dangerous psychological game where the samurai sword acted as a catalyst, evoking the most negative instincts in each human being. Arthur, a youth born and raised in America, was now surrounded by suspicion regarding his loyalty and origins. Meanwhile, Fenton used the mistakes of Arthur's father to justify the decadence and violent obsession gnawing at his mind every day. The peak of the drama lay in how the episode depicted the loss of rational control under the guidance of hatred. The attic door suddenly jammed, imprisoning them in a space with no escape, forcing a life-and-death confrontation. The feeling of isolation and fanaticism turned two people who could have been companions into enemies, wounding each other in despair. George Takei once shared about this role. "It was a fierce script. It forces you to look at the darkest parts of history and yourself without mercy." The ending of the episode with a self-destructive negative act by both characters sent a grim message about the cycle of hatred. Rod Serling and the production team wanted to emphasize that if humans cannot free themselves from the ghosts of the past, they will forever be trapped in the attics of prejudice and solitude. The final image when the sword is drawn brought glory to no one, leaving only the silence of an irreparable tragedy. These films immediately created a powerful wave of public opinion, leaving authorities and the public in shock. The fury of public opinion. As soon as the final signals of the episode faded from the screen, the CBS television station was besieged by a storm of violent criticism unprecedented in broadcasting history. The Japanese American Citizens League immediately sent fierce protest documents, accusing the film's content of poisoning the public mind with information that distorted historical truth. Building the image of a Japanese character admitting his father was a spy inadvertently added fuel to the fire of prejudices already heavy after the war. Complaints did not stop at social organizations, but spread to veterans, who felt insulted by the depiction of a soldier as unstable and violent. Pressure from the public quickly reached the pockets of television executives as advertising partners began expressing concern about their brands being associated with divisive content. In the harsh media environment of 1964, the safety of sponsors was always the top priority, and any sign of a boycott was considered a financial disaster. A representative from the network had to admit in internal reports, "We cannot take a risk with a work that makes a large segment of the audience feel directly attacked in their national pride." Given the situation, the network leadership made a brutal decision: completely seal this episode, erasing its name from all replay catalogs and subsequent franchise contracts. This executive decision effectively transformed The Encounter into a deeply hidden scar within the otherwise massive and celebrated legacy of the Twilight Zone. For a staggering period of over 50 years, the episode vanished entirely from the public eye, being systematically excluded from periodic television reruns, official physical disc collections, and even formal retrospective discussions regarding the series' historical impact. Consequently, later generations of fans could only catch whispers of its existence, hearing about it as if it were a dark urban legend. A cursed episode whispered to have been buried because it was simply too truthful and too cruel for the era to handle. This act of total censorship was not merely a tactical move to protect advertising revenue. Rather, it represented a broad, systematic effort to soothe a restless society that remained caught in a painful struggle between the unhealed wounds of the past and a profoundly fragile, emerging desire for national harmony. George Takei, who later became an icon of the civil rights struggle, was also significantly affected by this wave of opposition. He told the press that he felt torn playing a character who indirectly confirmed the government's erroneous suspicions about the loyalty of Japanese Americans. Takei emphasized, "It was a heartbreaking contradiction when art tries to describe pain but inadvertently reinforces the prejudices that once pushed thousands of families into misery." This backlash made filmmakers realize that sometimes presenting the truth without full historical context can lead to unpredictable consequences in public opinion. The silence surrounding this episode for decades was not simply about copyright troubles, but because the historical wound it reopened was still too raw for those involved. To decode why a fictional work had such a devastating impact, we must look back at the secret files of a period when human freedom was traded for a fear named national security. The truth from the internment camps. To explain the root cause of why the episode The Encounter became a taboo name, one must look at the historical reality of 1942 when Executive Order 9066 was signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. This legal document allowed the military to force more than 120,000 Japanese Americans to leave their residences to move to internment camps located deep inland. Notably, about 2/3 of those detained were American citizens born in the United States, but they were still stripped of their freedom and property based solely on ethnicity without any trial process or criminal evidence. Post-war investigations by the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians confirmed there was no systematic act of sabotage or treason committed by this community during World War II. The plot point where the character Arthur admits his father was a spy guiding enemy planes in the attack on Pearl Harbor directly contradicted the efforts to exonerate the Japanese American community. This fiction was seen as an act of legitimizing the past erroneous suspicions of the U.S. government, which caused economic damage estimated at billions of dollars in today's value. George Takei, who played Arthur, is a living witness as he himself was once detained at the Rower Relocation Center in Arkansas at the age of 5. In civil rights presentations, he often recalled the image of American soldiers holding guns escorting his family out of their home as evidence of the failure of the Constitution. He shared in the Washington Post, "We were locked behind barbed wire fences while machine guns were pointed at us. It was a betrayal of democracy." The social context of 1964, when the episode aired, was also the peak of the civil rights movement in America. Screening content that recalled the suspected loyalty of a minority group was seen as an act of exacerbating existing racial conflicts. Civil organizations argued that if the public believed in the existence of spies like Arthur's father in the film, then mass detention in the past would be viewed as a necessary security measure rather than a human rights violation crime. Archives at the Library of Congress show that actual wartime intelligence reports from the FBI and ONI confirmed Japanese Americans were exemplary citizens. Indeed, the 442nd Infantry Regiment, consisting entirely of Japanese origin soldiers, became the most decorated unit in U.S. military history. The conflict between Rod Serling's script and historical reality created a powerful wave of boycotts from audiences with political awareness. Television critics of the time argued that using a sensitive fictional element to create drama for an entertainment film was an act of social irresponsibility. These pressures forced the CBS network to archive the episode to avoid potential defamation and racial discrimination lawsuits. The disappearance of the episode for over 50 years was not just a technical decision by the network, but also reflected the awkwardness of American society when facing systematic mistakes in the past. Film historians evaluate this as one of the most typical examples of mass media having to yield to historical truths that cannot be bent. This irreconcilable conflict turned The Encounter into a taboo name, forcing networks to bury it deep in archives for decades as a way to avoid the ghosts of the past. When social awareness changed and official apologies from the highest levels were issued, the door to the long-sealed dark zone was suddenly nudged open again. The journey from a shunned work to a costly lesson on human rights marked an unprecedented turning point in modern television history. The Return and the Apology. After more than 50 years of being sealed in the film archives of CBS, the episode The Encounter unexpectedly reappeared to the astonishment of cinema enthusiasts. The most important milestone occurred in 2016, when the science fiction channel Sci-Fi decided to break the half-century-long media embargo. The episode was broadcast once more in its original, uncut form, as a featured segment of a New Year's marathon program. This decision was not merely about replaying an old entertainment work. It was seen as a deliberate act of directly confronting the past censorship mistakes and the systemic avoidance of the American television industry. This high-profile return took place in a social and political context completely different from the atmosphere of 1964. By this time, America had undergone a profound process of deep historical reflection, a journey that reached its climax when President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. This landmark document served as a formal acknowledgement by the government, officially admitting that the forced internment of Japanese Americans during World War II was a grave injustice rooted in race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. The issuance of this official apology, coupled with subsequent reparations, helped establish a more enlightened cultural foundation. This shift allowed the public to re-examine the encounter through a multi-dimensional and tolerant lens, rather than focusing solely on the surface-level offense that had sparked the original controversy. When viewed from a 21st century perspective, many film critics have praised Rod Serling's profound vision in depicting the lasting psychological traumas of soldiers. Rather than being dismissed as a racist work, the episode now appears as a haunting warning about the absolute destructiveness of hatred and its power to corrode the human soul. The samurai sword, once the explosive center of a decades-long controversy, is now analyzed by modern scholars as a profound metaphor for the legacy of violence, a cycle of which both Fenton and Arthur were ultimately victims. An in-depth breakdown published in The Hollywood Reporter emphasized this perspective, noting, "Serling was ahead of his time in depicting hatred as a virus spreading through generations, turning innocent people into villains in a loop with no escape." By 2025, driven by the massive explosion of global streaming platforms and high-profile projects rebooting the Twilight Zone franchise, this once forbidden episode has been officially restored and included in legacy collections. It now stands as a permanent fixture in the series' history, serving as a vital and sobering lesson in the evolution of media censorship and cultural memory. Modern cinema seminars often take The Encounter as a prime example of how art can be distorted by the fears of the era but will always find true value over time. George Takei, in his late 80s, has also made conciliatory statements about this role, considering it an inseparable part of the journey struggling for Japanese Americans to have a more equal and authentic voice on screen. The presence of The Encounter on screens today is a reminder that no secrets can be hidden forever under the dust of time. What was once considered most dangerous now serves as the most valuable lesson in how we face the darkness within every human soul. The story of the episode banned for 55 years has concluded, but its meaning remains entirely valuable for our era. It reminds us that true art does not always bring comfort. Sometimes it must cause pain to awaken the conscience and force society to face the dark corners of history. If you found this content helpful, please support us by hitting like, sharing the video widely, and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next journeys exploring cinematic mysteries. Let us look back at past values and never let fear cloud the truth. Thank you for watching and see you in the upcoming content.